Welcome to the Fieldhouse Strength Podcast. Fieldhouse Strength Podcast. If it's strength and conditioning, powerlifting, athlete performance, general fitness, and anything in between, we're talking about it. Your hosts are pros who've done it all and here to share that knowledge with you. This is the Fieldhouse Strength Podcast. And here are your hosts, Shaun Jones and Jonathan Byrd.
Welcome back to the Fieldhouse Strength Podcast. I'm Shaun Jones, and with me as always is Jonathan Byrd. Hey, Byrd.
Hey, welcome back.
It's been a busy couple weeks for us. We're getting back in now. We've finishing up track season, starting up spring workouts for football. We had mentioned in an earlier podcast that a good topic might be what we consider a good athlete.
It's interesting. It's a topic that I've read many articles people talk about, but and I have a few oddball ones that I don't think people consider that I felt like they're qualities that I've seen from guys I've coached and or played with that really separate them from being a high-quality athlete or a guy that's just playing the game.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I just Googled it to see what some people said about it. And really, some of them, I think they just made it such a difficult subjective thing to figure out. One guy was like, I don't know, but I know it when I see it, you know?
Yeah.
Well, that's what they said about pornography in the Supreme Court, you know? That's different.
I definitely haven't read that case study.
It was a real one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, I believe you.
I think it was George Washington when he was a Supreme Court justice.
Okay.
Have to look that one up. But it really was a person.
So I mean, there's a lot of qualities that make up an athlete. My first go, you can't use the word, athletic, but I mean, my go-to would be his ability to move, both laterally and forward. Can they change directions? Can they sprint and move in a diagonal fashion? That's a big one for me.
Yeah, and kind of the first thing that I wrote down, I think that goes with that, is versatility. And that can mean 100 different things, but specifically, can you move in a number of different ways? And then I'm thinking in terms of different sports or different activities. Are they pretty good at everything they do?
Yeah, your best athletes of all time have been good at a lot of sports.
Yeah.
I mean, your Jim Thorpes, who were multiple professional athletes, your Bo Jacksons, your Deion Sanders, those guys were able to play a lot of things at high levels.
And it's like when I was a kid, they had the Dan and Dave competition.
Yeah, I remember that well.
Yeah, and to look at the numbers those guys had, I mean, they were both under 11 seconds in the 100 meters. They both had really competitive throws for the disc and the shot put, and both of them under 200 pounds.
Yeah, I remember that very well. I don't remember what Olympics that was, the early 90s, right?
Yeah.
But it stands out in my mind because I remember thinking, these guys are just phenomenal athletes. I remember in college, at those high-level track meets, we're at Florida State, and they had, every Division I school up and down the East Coast had the relays, and the females that were doing those sports were just phenomenal athletically. I mean, and chiseled out of stone. It was impressive looking and athletically.
Yeah, and that's one thing, we might talk about this some other time, but the difference between training male and female athletes, too, is once a woman decides she's going to be an athlete, for the most part, in my experience, you don't have to worry about getting them to focus. You're talking with coaches this time of year about kids being recruited, and a big thing that some of them are looking for, I would imagine, is if these kids play other sports.
Oh, that's one of the questions always asked. What other sports do they play, and what success have they had at it?
So it's not enough that they're trying it.
Yeah, it's not just enough that they're playing another sport, but are they successful at it? Are they winners?
Yeah.
Now that's a whole other can of worms we could talk about of is winning part of being a good athlete, and to a degree, it is.
Well, that's one of the things that determines whether you're good or not is the success you have. Mm-hmm. If you go get beat one-on-one basketball all the time, you're not very successful athlete.
No, yeah.
And so I know that in the 90s, Bobby Bowden wouldn't recruit a defensive player unless he played basketball, including defensive tackles.
That makes sense, though.
Yeah.
The guys got to be explosive on the low block, being able to move their feet independently, jump.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it. And one of the things that there's a reason why every combine in every sport has some sort of jump, whether it's a vertical or a broad, some multiple. I mean, that's a big part of being an athlete. Are you an explosive athlete? Can you jump? Can you put distance between you and someone else?
That's it. And if you're going to be a fast runner as well as having good change of direction, that sort of thing, you got to be able to explode, but you also have to be able to stop so you could change direction quickly.
And you'll see that from a lot of, nice way to phrase this, subpar trainers. Mm-hmm. They'll teach you a lot about trying to be explosive, but they never talk to you about how to stop.
Right. That's because they don't understand the concept. I remember years ago that the National Strength and Conditioning Association, their recommendation that an athlete should not do any kind of plyometric work until they could back squat their body weight. And that's, not a hard and fast rule, but I think it's a good guideline.
I can understand that. The word plyometric gets thrown around a lot, though, in the aspect of, I think there's a lot of jumping things you can do that would fall under what most people would consider a plyometric, like a 2-foot bunny hop. I mean, it falls under, so complicated stuff or like jump series stuff, I would probably agree with you there. But, I start everybody with a kettlebell or a goblet squat of some form if we ever get to a back squat anyway, so.
Yeah. And really, when you're having to look at those types of guidelines, you're trying to get some experience at that point.
Yeah, and you're probably coaching younger athletes at that level at that point too.
Because if you're looking at that, there are a lot of prerequisites before I'd have them do a body weight squat.
Yeah, that's a can of worms.
Yeah,
to a degree. So what else you got? We talked about being able to run and change directions, being explosive. What else we're thinking?
One on my list is hip extension.
Okay. Yeah.
And to kind of define extension is if you were to stand straight up out of a chair, how far do you push your hips forward? That's basic hip extension.
I can't think of a good athlete that can't do that.
No.
I've never thought about that though. Like, you know what I mean? For some people that just comes natural, which falls back to where you're naturally an athlete. I've never thought about this. So generally, I have a look of surprise on my face because I've never thought about that. But that is actually very, very important piece of it that so many people come to naturally, so I don't even think about being able to do that. I don't know, you were in here while I was coaching some younger guys on how to squat in here earlier, and we're talking about being able to sit back, the actual extension of the hips, getting back to get into a good squat. And both of those guys are pretty good athletes, and they still struggled with it to a degree.
15 years ago, you could take that for granted a little bit. You can't anymore because kids aren't as active as they used to be, and it's not really their fault. But sit down so much, you get to a point where you've got relative flexibility. It feels like you're extending, but you're not. Huh. So that has to be taught, I think. One way that I've learned over the years to test whether or not a kid has the natural ability to hinge is just to tell them to touch their toes. And if they fall straight down and bend at the waist, they've got work to do. And the kids that are more naturally athletic are going to hinge at the hips and reach down and do it without you telling them.
Pretty interesting rule of thumb to pick apart stuff without ever knowing that, telling them what they're doing.
Yeah. When you can identify that, that's always a good thing, saves you some work. So flexibility in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
High school sit and reach.
Yeah. Hey, there's a school that I worked at. We brought a kid on campus to recruit him. He did sit and reach. Had him do a broad jump, too. We brought in a kid that was going to be a nose guard. He was 370 pounds. We had him do the broad jump in the field house, and I thought he was going to go through the second story down. And the kid had the best sit and reach that we had seen all spring as a 370-pound guy.
That's scary.
He had other fish to fry.
Yeah.
So specifically as it relates to hip extension, flexibility in the hips, the knees, the ankles.
Yeah, well, and if you don't have those things, you can't run.
Right.
You can't run. I've seen it time and time again. Stiff hips, stiff ankles. Stiff hips, you can't pick that leg up You know, the stiff ankles, you can't bend. There's no squat involved there. It's really hard. And people forget the mobility of those joints to play such a big part in being a quality athlete.
Right. And there's nothing more frustrating than getting a film on a kid that was 6'5", 270 pounds, and he's a tackle. You're like, he's still left. Maybe it's because he's light. And then you realize he has no flexibility in his whole body.
Yeah, the ankle mobility is a piece that most people miss. I was sharing, I was talking back and forth with a guy's office coordinator at the college level. We're sharing some ideas of what we both do offensively, and we've been talking about strength and conditioning the day or so prior, and J.J. Watt had just shared a photo of him and his brother doing some ankle mobility work, and I sent it to him. I was like, it's amazing that we just talked this up, but how many people neglect this, especially at a high school level and a smaller college level, because those guys don't have the experience to realize how important that is.
Yeah, and really that's where it all starts. Yeah. Do you have anything that I haven't brought up?
So I got one that I'm sure after I say it, other people are like, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense, but the mental side of it. Mm-hmm. You cannot be a high-quality athlete or athletic, in my opinion, without being mentally tough. Mm-hmm. Because the idea is that you are good at a sport. Ideally multiple sports. To be able to do those things, you have to be able to mentally push through the things that go wrong, the training sessions that are going to be difficult. I can tell you now, most kids hate mobility, most adults hate mobility. It sucks, it hurts, but if you're not mentally tough, you won't make it. And I have never met a person that I thought was a high quality athlete who was not mentally tough enough to suffer and get things done.
Yeah, you can never count on them. They won't be around long enough for them to let you down most of the time.
I've seen a lot of people that I would define as athletic.
That's exactly what I was thinking, yeah.
But as a good athlete, there's different. You know, somebody who's athletic can do a good broad jump, can do a nice explosive jump to a box. But someone who is a good athlete is able to get 10 of those because they're not going to quit. They're going to keep getting coached. They're going to push themselves. And that, to me, is the difference between an athlete and being athletic. You know?
It's funny because in coaching circles, that's how we talk. You talk to any coach anywhere. What do you think? Oh, he's an athlete. Or he's athletic.
Yep.
You know, you could tell by the pitch. There are guys that are athletically inclined.
Yeah, absolutely. Have the skill set to do it, but could be a mental midget and or just not have the desire anymore. You run into that sometimes. Or they've never been mentored in that aspect of it. They might could run fast in a straight line. They might could change directions. They might could do all those things. But when their sporting event is on the line, they turtle shell. That is not a good athlete for me. I'm sorry.
They will never reach their potential either. So I would rather have a guy, I would imagine you would too, that had less ability but would be willing to push to his genetic potential and get what he had, and you may end up with a net plus over the other guy anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to, in both the strength and conditioning world and in the coaching world, to count on a kid or man or woman who does not put into sweat equity.
And that's one thing that it's always been a little pet peeve of mine. When you start talking with other people, and it comes up that you played a college sport. And if you've got that one insecure person that goes, I could have gone here, but it just, I normally keep quiet on that, but it kind of denigrates the hard work that I had to put in.
No doubt. You know, and I tell people all the time that, you know, when they ask me about my background, I'm like, well, I played in college, and then I bounced around the Arena League for a few years and really enjoyed my experience. Like, I never really go into detail about where or what, you know, and if they ask, I tell them. But absolutely, you know, it turns into sometimes, well, I could have went here or there, but I chose to do this. Congratulations, but you asked me about my background. It's not you don't have to tit for tat me. And at the same time, like, I know what those practices were like in college. I distinctly remember the 5 a.m. wake-up calls and going to bed at midnight because we were watching film and or going over playbooks and turning around and doing it all again the next day for weeks at a time.
And still being evaluated.
And can you run? Can you change directions? Do you have a hip extension? Like all those things are, being looked at for 12 hours plus a day.
And speaking for me, and probably to you as well to some degree, because of our height, everything I got at that level, I had to work at least as hard as everyone else.
Absolutely. I tell people all the time, I got the most out of my 5'10" frame that I think anybody could have ever dreamed of. Mm-hmm. I was not built to play at a very high level. I was probably not built to even play college football, but somehow I managed to be out there, and somehow I managed to have a lot of success, and somehow somebody thought I was good enough to give me a shot at playing at the next level too. And it was not because I was born naturally just a great athlete, I can tell you that much.
Yeah, and this is no slight to you. It's just you saw some of the guys that I played with on those teams, 6'5", 6'6", and there were more than a handful of them.
Yeah.
But you won't say it, but you got a lot of accolades that none of those guys ever did.
Yeah, I always avoid that topic, and I don't know why. My friends make fun of me when people bring it up, and I'm like, yeah, I was okay, because I was humbled for 3 years by a guy who made sure I was humble. Yeah. I had a coach that made sure he kept me humble, and I appreciated that because it made me work that much harder. I wanted to be the best, and I made the mistake one time of telling him I wanted to be the best football player I could possibly be, and he coached me in that direction, which meant a lot of verbal chewings and a lot of, that's not bad, but you still suck.
Yeah.
And I was good with that. Mm-hmm. Some people don't respond to that, and a lot of today's age kids would not respond well to that, but that's part of it. I had to learn to do those things. I couldn't get a good, legitimate parallel squat in high school, probably right up until my senior year. That's how tight I was in the hips. Yeah. I was never all that fast. I never learned to change directions all that well. I just kept working at it and getting better. And I was blessed with a pretty good high school football coach that understood those things and was able to kind of coach me into those things. Mm-hmm. I kind of make the joke sometimes that Division I athletes are born and every other one are made.
Yeah.
So the fact that, most of those guys that are Division I athletes are born and going to be tall, going to be broad-shouldered, going to be long-armed, and then they work their butt off to make it better. Right. I'm not saying they didn't do that, but at almost every other level, those guys are not quite 6'5". They're not quite, you know what I mean? And they kind of had to develop themselves into a college athlete.
For sure. Because there's a lot of, as my high school coach used to say, there's a lot of potential in the graveyard.
Yeah.
And the old saying goes, coaches make quarterbacks, mom make running backs.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. I've been blessed. I've been around some amazing athletes, both at high school and college, and then professional level. One of the arena teams I was on, I was the only guy on the roster who hadn't played in the NFL, and then the arena 2 team I was on had 6 guys that spent multiple years in the NFL. We beat the tar out of people because we were so much more athletic than they were. And I was way down the list of studs on that team.
Well, one that I think of is balance.
Absolutely. That's one that definitely people take for granted. And that's one of those things that you can work on, but to a degree, you're kind of born with that. One of the best kids I've coached balance-wise, he broke his leg in multiple places because he was wrapped up, but he had such good balance. He was able to stay on his feet and keep twisting and moving, and that ended up breaking his leg.
Yeah, Bo Jackson, they interviewed that surgeon that did his hip surgery, and he thought it was impossible to get the injury he got the way that he got it. Yeah. Pretty much only Bo Jackson could get hurt the way he did because he was that strong and athletic and balanced.
It's an unreal athlete.
Yeah, he might be the best athlete in American history. So many of these things are interwoven. So many ways, not very coordinated. Boy, there's a lot to go into when it talks about coordination. Yeah,
but balance is a huge part of it, and the ability to move each foot independently, or hand or arm. You know what I mean? That part is unilateral movements are really a big part of how I would judge how athletic a person is. As silly as people may think doing a dot drill is, if you can't hop on your left foot or your right foot and moving around, we got a lot of issues here.
You never run on 2 feet. Yeah, and like you said, with the football especially, and basketball, I would say, you're moving in confined areas, changing direction in confined areas. You're landing and you're jumping. Rarely is it going to be a single clean type of movement.
Yeah.
So right along with balance, you can't have agility without balance. So agility is the other one that I've got. And that's just, I define that as the ability to change direction.
Yeah, and so, for me, rarely do I ever see guys that are explosive, like an explosive athlete, who don't have the ability to change direction. Like, they're really all just an interwoven piece of things. And so I get what a guy says, well, I know it when I see it. Yeah, I mean, most people do, but you got to break it down a little bit. And for all the issues that are a lot of those combine tests, they are a good painting a picture of how athletic a guy is.
It gives you a start.
Yeah, between the L drill and the pro shuttle, you get a good idea. Can the guy accelerate? Can he change direction? Can he use both feet to move in and out? And if you can do those things, you're typically a pretty good athlete.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the versatility point. Versatility, you get a big sample size of different things and you put it together and you kind of look at, all right, they're pretty good at all of it. What specific things for the position that they play are we interested in? So a lineman most times is not going to have a great 40 time, but he should have a good 10 time.
Yeah. And I don't know if in the game of football has changed so much in the last decade.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys are all running 5.2 subs, at this point. I mean, that's a scary thing. In my opinion, some of the best athletes in the world are defensive linemen.
Oh, yeah.
NFL defensive linemen. I mean, you got guys that are 330, 40 pounds that, can jump out of 4 foot of water onto the top of the pool, can, run 4.5 40s. I mean, it's scary how athletic some of those guys are. And, they're getting paid for it. What I mean? It's become, people have started to realize that how such a tool that is in the game of football.
Yeah, I had this same conversation with some guys a few years ago, and I remember we talked about it forever, but defensive ends, depending on the scheme you're in, NFL defensive ends, there can't be a better athlete in any sport.
Yeah, because you're thinking a rangy guy, they're 6'4" or longer.
And play basketball
Yeah,
then.
yeah, and can bend because they got to be able to snap at the hips and violently snap at the hips, because they're taking on 330-pound offensive linemen. You can jump because they've got to cover the walkway. They can open their hips and run, which is another big part of being a good athlete. Can they do a baseball run? Can they open that hip and run? And so there's probably not a better athlete in the world, in my opinion, as a group, than NFL level defensive ends.
Right. I went to an Indianapolis Colts practice longer ago than I care to remember, and I was watching the offensive linemen because I wanted to see what the tackle's footwork looked like. They were just in helmets, one-on-one drills. The tackle gets out of his stance and kicks one step, and the defensive end was at his hip.
Yep.
And I was like, I've never seen. Did it again, and he did that to all the offensive linemen. It was Dwight Freeney. Mm-hmm. And you talk about somebody that could bend. I mean, you could almost touch his hand to the ground, inside hand, as he was rushing the edge. And it showed why he had the career he had. Nobody could compete with him.
Yeah, the leverage those guys are able to play with is just phenomenal.
Yeah, so you talk about flexibility, balance, and agility. The other one I've gotten written down is hand-eye coordination. Somebody throws a ball at you, can you catch it without getting hit in the face? That's a rudimentary level of it. Yeah. Kind of joking around about getting different blocking schemes in, and the kids couldn't process it right away. But that's got to do with their age a lot of times. But sometimes kids know what you're telling them, can see it, and execute it right away. And I think that comes down to visual coordination of some sort.
Yeah, I'll give you a good example of one that so J.R. Smith, who played in the NBA straight out of high school, he's back in college now, and I think he was an All-American. I might be wrong. I definitely a minimum All-Conference golfer.
Yeah.
Pretty
versatile.
Yeah, great. Two polar opposite sports.
Yeah.
Amazing hand-eye coordination and be able to body control to be able to hit a golf ball. I mean, that's one of the harder things to do in sports.
Oh, I know it. I worked my way into being good enough to compete at sports that required aggressiveness and strength. But I was never a finesse guy.
Yeah. Still
can't hit a golf ball. Got cut from JV baseball. It was political.
Yeah, I'm sure that was it.
Yeah. To me, hitting a baseball, hitting a golf ball, I couldn't imagine even trying to hit a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. in basketball, being able to get a rebound, that's hand-eye coordination, being able to see it before it comes down.
There's a reason why Michael Jordan was able to play AAA baseball after spending 10 years not playing. And people say, well, he did it for publicity. He batted like 280-something. Like, he had a solid batting average.
Yeah, and everybody talked about how bad he sucked. And I remember one of the coaches from the White Sox club was like, well, he doesn't have good bat speed, which is right. He's looking at major league players. He's also 6'6".
Yeah, and hadn't picked up a bat in over almost probably 2 decades.
Yeah. Look at Randy Moss. You tell me he couldn't have played in the NBA?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Ken Griffey Jr., do you remember, this is a long time ago, but they had the other athlete slam dunk contest, and it was like Griffey and Barry Bonds, and I mean, it was amazing how athletic those guys were and what they're able to do. Romo is able to secure some spots on the PGA Golf Tour as he's able to play his way into it. LeBron James was an all-state wide receiver as a sophomore in high school in the state of Ohio, which is is saying something.
That's legit football there.
So athletes are able to do a lot of things at a high level, and typically it carries over to multiple sports.
Right. When I first realized that was I was in college, and there was a guy on the team that checked all of the combine boxes. 40, he was strong. He had a 40-yard dash. He was strong. He was almost 40 years old, too. All those numbers looked good, but it just didn't translate to the field. And somebody's like, well, I bet he wouldn't be good in basketball. I said, what's that got to do with anything?
Yeah.
But it had everything to do with it.
Yeah. I mean, I was never a good basketball player. I'm 5'10", in fact. Yeah. So, if it wasn't a rebound, I didn't have much of a shot. I was always a decent basketball player, and my roommate in college, who was a left tackle, was a pretty good basketball player. Mm-hmm. We were both pretty good athletes and pretty similar athletically. We weren't ever the last guys picked. So,
yeah, I wish I could. Anyway, next thing. You could go on and on about what athleticism is. You could break it down. I mean, we could just look at what causes hip extension.
Yeah.
And do a couple of podcasts on that. But overall, somebody that does pretty well at everything. It reminds me, over the years I've trained different guys preparing to go into different types of selection courses in the military. And I don't claim to be an expert on what it takes to become that type of soldier, but I could get them in a type of shape where they go into selection and they don't get hurt because of something stupid.
Yeah.
And the ones that, in my experience, that have made it weren't particularly great at one thing, but they were pretty good at everything.
Yeah.
They would be the first or second guy you pick for basketball. They were lacrosse players. Versatility is a big part of it.
Yep, I'm sure. Those guys were, I promise you, all pretty mentally tough.
You're not going to make it if you're not.
Yeah. Completely side note, always encourage your children to play a lot of sports.
Yeah.
Encourage them to compete and encourage them to be coached, because all of those things are really playing a factor of being an athlete and being a good employee and a good adult later in life.
Yeah, whether you think you're going to play beyond high school or not, I know people probably get sick of hearing coaches say, football teaches you about life, but it does.
Yeah.
Maybe it can be articulated in a way that doesn't sound old school, but any sport done well, coached well, and with effort is a teacher for life. My opinion is a kid should try as many sports as they can and still be successful at all of them, and not specialize too early.
Yeah.
Because a lot of college coaches, and I can't speak for the recruiting efforts of certain sports, but as you said, the bar is being raised from the time that I was referring back to bring it up, is before it's like, are they good athletes? Are they playing other sports? Now they want to know what kind of success they've had in each of those sports.
Yep, exactly. And that's a big part of it. What, on a kind of an odd note, what is the most athletic thing you've ever seen?
Ever seen? That's a good question.
When I was thinking about, what makes up an athlete, I was kind of running through my mind of guys that I've played with or seen in person and what I thought the most athletic thing I had seen. And 2 come to mind. One was I played with a guy named Jamie Deese. When he left Wake Forest, he was like second all-time in receiving yards. I watched him in an arena game go up for a ball in the end zone. His feet were over the wall, They hit him. He flips over the wall. He still catches the ball, secures it into the ground, not into the stands. I mean, it's a 5-foot fall. And I just thought it was one of the most amazing coordinated hand-eye things I ever saw. And then the other one was I had the opportunity to practice against Big John Henderson. And he was just so athletic and so quick in that small area that it was just amazing to me watching him move with great pad level and great hands, and me just barely able to touch him when we're talking about a 6'6", 350-pound man.
Yeah.
So it was just, those two things. And so when I think of those things, I think of how explosive and quick those guys were, in both short distances and long distances for a guy that big. So.
Yeah, and a lot of times something a big guy does is the most impressive thing. I think back, the first thing that came to my mind, there was a guy I played with in high school, and without exaggeration, I would say he could have been a Division I athlete in 3 or 4 different sports. It was when he was in the 8th grade. It's the most athletic thing I've seen. He was 5'10", and he's playing basketball. He goes up pretty hard with the right hand, and then at the last second switches to the left hand and dunks it. 8th grade.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. He did a lot of stuff that was pretty impressive. As a freshman, he called a touchdown pass to tie us with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and then picked off a pass for a touchdown
to win the game. That's pretty good. Pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So, everybody's going to define what an athlete is in different terms, but I think most people have a similar idea and a similar concept of what it looks like.
Yeah, for sure. And like the guy said, when you see it. Well, no kidding. But it's when you have a sea of guys that are close when you can.
Yeah, that it's like picking out cattle. Which one's going to produce the most? You gotta. It's a fine line.
You gotta see a lot of them.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a good stopping point. I don't think we've exhausted the topic, but
and I'm sure it'll come up again as we go through this. So.
Yeah, that's all I got, Byrd.
Hey, if you've got an issue that's keeping you from reaching your potential, go to our website, www.fieldhousestrength.com. Schedule a consultation. Maybe I can help. If you have a nagging injury or movement problem, we'll do a virtual Zoom assessment. Based on what I see, I'll let you know how I can help. Free of charge, no obligation.